Kia ora, g'day. Welcome back once again here with part 3 of my reaction to Mr. Chris Ryan and Ben Garwood on the Hugh Care HR podcast. So let's jump back in.
Seven. On this particular selection, it was around about 87. It was that laxed. The students were actually putting OPs on the DS, and they knew that as long as they stuck with it, they would get in. What happened? About a year after them guys passing, it was a large pass rate. Probably about 10 or 12 of them were RTU'd. Sadly, some of them were killed because they shouldn't have been there in the first place because somebody tried to change selection. And as I said, the jungle is where you see into the soul of your students. You understand, you know him better because you're watching him, every single day. And this CO didn't get it. He didn't understand it. He just thought the hill space was.
But surely he would have done the jungle phase himself, though.
Yeah. I think he had freaking issues, this guy. He was the one that brought in cross-pollination, where a squadron, there was a reason why he did it. Going back to the 70s, he was a young troop officer, and he got bullied by a group within B Squadron. And these were all major characters. And it was like a mafia. And the squadrons all had mafias. So nobody ever thought that he would come back as a squadron commander and never as the CO. So when he came back as the CO, he brought in the policy then of cross-pollination of senior NCOs, and it was to break up the mafias within it. Now, it didn't work because what would happen is, and in particular, G Squadron were very clever at it. If G Squadron had guys they didn't want, they would say, oh, okay, we'll send them over to B Squadron, we'll send them to A Squadron and get rid of them. But their senior NCOs were always like G Squadron. Everybody else was playing the game where you then go across to be Troop Staff Sergeant, with D Squadron. And it was never a good policy really, because when you have a tight group, all of a sudden, you're maybe waiting to become Troop Staff Sergeant, and then somebody from A Squadron goes over and takes it. You think, I don't know my next stop is this.
Some of my best TLs though, they came from other squadrons. I don't know why they didn't get a job in that squadron when they came to my squadron, even though they're outsiders.
Yeah.
They were amazing.
It worked because we had some great staffies come from, in particular A Squadron. But what it was his issue there was breaking the mafias down. He was the guy who got the whole regiment into the briefing room, and this is where he told us that they were going to badge the senior NCOs from the det, and it kicked off. And he said, "I'm here to listen to your reactions." Well, I was a young probably corporal. All the senior NCOs stood up and said, "No way, not a chance," because again they were looking maybe 10 years down the line at postings. So you've got somebody who's badged now that hasn't been through the system, and he could be taking your posting. Anyway, this whole thing kicked off. It was quite interesting. And at the end, he stood up and just said, "It's happening anyway. I don't care what you want." But these were his ideas, and he was the one, like I say, brought in this policy to get extra numbers into the regiment. If you survive the jungle, you're in, which is ridiculous. They just don't work. And that's going back to lowering standards, say, to get a female officer.
Did he say if you survive the jungle you're in? I thought he was talking about that the CO said if you survive the hills phase, then you'd go on and you'd pass. I might have heard that wrong. Or maybe he miscommunicated what he was trying to say. But I thought Chris had mentioned that this particular CO, or there was comments around it, might have been in the second reaction, talking about if you get through the hills, or his belief was, not Chris's, but the CO's belief was, if people got through the hills phase, that they would go on and be badged, or that they should be badged. But there he just said if they get through the jungle phase. Jungle even here in NZ at the time when I was on cycle in NZ, it was spoken about how critical the jungle phase was in the UK, and how, you know, a lot of people fail that part of their selection. I didn't realise at that time that that was all part of their selection. I thought that was their cycle, but it's all part of the 6-month selection process to get into the UK SF. So that's interesting.
A female soldier in, it's like, what's the point?
No, exactly. There's interesting things about having a female on the ground for many reasons. Whether they've got a skill set that they bring to the ground, whether they are very capable of doing the job, or whether they actually bring just a different dynamic to the environment. A woman, you know, naturally brings a different dynamic to a male environment. That's a massive asset for when you're trying to work, especially in some of the shitholes that we've been to, where it's a male-dominated environment. You bring a woman in, and it changes that, especially if you've got a woman who's intelligent, she understands the situation, she understands the environment she's in. She can be a massive asset in those things. But actually, what are we asking her to do? We're not asking her to get on the 50 cal. We're not asking her to get on the kit, start kicking doors in. Why do we need a woman to do that? Unless she's able to do that and stick up the blokes, then great. But actually, are we trying to do that?
No, it doesn't work. But you think back to Northern Ireland, the girls that we had from the deck, they could do things that we could never do, as in the regiment was the muscle for the, you know, the end part of the operation. But these girls have, you know, like big gold balls to do what they were doing, you know, sometimes by themselves, and getting into places where not one person from the regiment could get into. So that's a reason to have them, you know, in the regiment. Then they don't have to have that wing dagger to do that. They don't have to put themselves through selection. They just have to put themselves through a selection to be attached.
I don't think it'd be you know, to my mates, I don't think it'd be a pride thing that we'd be worried about a woman wearing our cap. It's got nothing. We're above that. Yeah. It's got nothing to do with that. It's making sure that, like you said, you're not lowering the standards to accommodate just because it's a political tick in the box for a Rupert or a you know, a minister to say that in their tenure they've got a woman through the door.
Yeah.
We really don't care. We just want to make sure that we've got the best of who we're going to get on the ground to do the job in hand. That's it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So you obviously spent a significant amount of time in the regiment after the infamous incident, the E&E and the capture. Did that operation? Now you've spoken about it afterwards, and how afterwards the correct things were put in place or were done after action reviews, etc. But in the longer term, did that operation bring about any fundamental changes within the unit?
Well, we had forward projection. I don't even know if that exists anymore within the regiment. We looked at the procedures and everything that went wrong, and how to, you know, change that, and then the procedures of going up. You know, this is before technology, trackers and everything else. Looking at, you know, what procedure can a soldier do in terms of if he's compromised and he's on the run, what does he do? So back at base, they can follow that procedure, and they'll have maybe a wrap run where they know exactly where he's at. It's kit. It is basic things like orders, making sure they've got them. That patrol was a complete disaster. There's a lot of bullshit talk spoken about it, and there was nothing right about it. Going down to weapons, I can remember when we were when we'd been told that we were going to, you know, do it. We got our personal weapons, which were 203s, and I went to the store and I said, "I'll take a couple of bandoliers of grenades." Now we've got no grenades. Well, what's the point of taking a 203? You know, with a weight. And I went, I haven't got them. So I went to my mates who were in A squadron, and they were working in half squadron formations, and they were giving me the stuff. Claymore mines had gone missing. And we were told to make them out of ice cream cartons. And I can remember Bob Consiglio, probably one of the bravest men I met, and I still believe that guy should have gotten a VC for what he did. Bob Consiglio, he was an ex-Marine. He sacrificed his life to save four guys. And he knew he was going to die, and he fits the criteria for a VC. I remember watching Bob getting sticks of C4, pressing them down in an ice cream carton with a bit of det cord, putting rounds in there, and then taping it up. And you think, you know, it's a waste of time anyway, but, this is not right. I asked for pistols. I said, do we have any suppressed pistols? And I got laughed at by the QM by saying, who the fuck do you think you are, James Bond? No, our pistols had gone missing, so we didn't have any pistols.
Wow, man, that's doesn't sound great, eh? Sounds terrible, to be honest. I've received a bunch of book clippings, screenshots from the individual that's asked me to do a reaction to this. So shout out to him. He knows who he is. Won't mention his name, but clippings from, I think, Peter Ratcliffe's book, from Andy McNabb and Bravo 20, from Chris Ryan, and from Mike Coburn from Soldier 5, I think it is. And just, man, and I think Mike Coburn's book, Soldier 5, is also endorsed by a guy, Mal. I think Mal was Australian heritage. I don't know if he was Australian Defence Force prior to, or Australian Regiment prior to going to the UK, but I think he was part of that patrol. And he has added his words to Mike's book, saying that, this is the version that Mike is telling is what's true, essentially. So it's hard to, I wasn't there, so it's not for me to go through and nitpick at. But what I've been asked to do, which I'll have a look at, is I'll have a look at and read through the different, just screenshots and excerpts of different pages from their different books, which have been kindly highlighted by the person that sent it through, and then just give my take. But I think without even having gone through all of those yet, it's hard to know who's telling the truth with regards to the Bravo 20 patrol. It's sad in terms of, I guess, maybe somewhat of a stain that it puts on the regiment from that perspective. And hearing these comments from Mr. Ryan around, lack of bandoliers for the 203, the 40 mil grenade launcher on the bottom of their weapon, not having those, not having claymores, not having pistols, it's pretty, paints a fairly grim picture when I'm listening to him. This is the first time I've heard any of this stuff anyway. Let's crack back in.
The trousers, the desert camp trousers came in. Once you'd walked around camp, your arse was hanging out. So we went to the SEALs, who had good, it was good camouflage. The day we were flying in, the RSM came round and he had 3 things to say. One was he told one of the lads to get a haircut, and the rest of us was to get our uniforms changed, that we weren't Yanks. And the next one was there was a squash match happening in about 3 months in Hereford. Now, I looked like a tramp when I came out. Everything was shredded. It was poor quality clothing. They were hanging on. These SEALs that give us all that gear. None of the guys had beards. All had short hair. In fact, it was the MTO that gave this lad a haircut prior to him flying in. And I think if your priority or level of care or interest in a patrol is getting a guy to get his fucking haircut and wear a British uniform, who gives a shit? Them Iraqis didn't know what American uniform was. And the kit was bad. Delta were just up the road from us, and they had the facility, because we had a young Rupert up there as a liaison. They had the facility to get satellite imagery to take on our where our LUP was going to be, and you could get the imagery within 24. I think it was 24 hours, and 30 hours if you wanted an analysis done on it, so you could look. There went no OPSEC. Well, in them days, the Americans knew what OPSEC meant. We were in a hangar with like airborne shelters in there, and local jundies sweeping it up, going into your place where all your orders are on. Delta were like well switched on. But again, we just got on with it. Splitting on this bit of conversation, I think this is something which is very unique to an SAS soldier. You take what you're given, and we adapt, and we will use or carry out the job with what we've got. The day I got back to base after my escape, I was sent straight up to Delta, because A Squadron Delta were going in to do a bomber assessment on that chemical plant I'd been in.
It's a great comment that he mentioned there, that they'll you'll make do with the kit that you've got. You've got no choice at the end of the day with regards to if you're limited on resources and kits and equipment, well then so be it. And if there's a mission, a task that needs to be done, and you're up for the task, then you go out there and you give it everything you have to achieve that task with the resources and kit that you have. Maybe not ideal. Well, it's not ideal, not great, but it just shows, these tasks can still be done, even if you don't have all the bells and whistles to go along with it. It would be nice to have all the gear at your disposal as and when and if you need it, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And I think Des Powell from Bravo 30 talks about some of the stuff that they did prior to going into Iraq in 91, and as part of that same operation that Chris Ryan and them were on, but separate patrols, different AO or area of operations that they were working in. And the fact that they went to the Americans, and the Americans were, awesome at providing for them and giving them stuff, I think, from ammunition and equipment and a whole bunch of things. So, yeah, anyway.
And when I spoke about the different kit, they were horrified what we'd gone in on. They were horrified at the support we had. Were horrified that there wasn't a rescue plan. But I wasn't. I just thought, that's the crack. That's what happened. Well, that's what happens. But going back to, I think that's why we're quite unique in terms of SF soldiers.
We're quite generalist, so we just adapt to whatever kind of shit gets thrown at us. It's a bit of a British stiff upper lip kind of bit to that. It's interesting. I was over at Dell and I looked at one of their little sort of museum areas and the kit that's on the guy that they had in around the situation in Mogadishu, and also during second Gulf was stuff that we were wearing. Well, not now, but a few years ago. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how little investment we had from the government to put into kit equipment. It's not just us. I mean, we had it good. You look at the Green Army, with that crap that they had, and what they're trying to do with. It's absolutely outrageous.
I think so. That kit issue. I mean, this is a current theme. 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
I'll tell you how ridiculous it got when behind the scenes, when A Squadron and D Squadron were prepping, they wanted an excuse to give something to De Villiers, and that's how these three patrols from B Squadron were formed. And we would go on the ground, we'd put our OPs in, find the scuds, and then you'd get the squadrons across. He came to us and said, right, you're putting 3 8-man patrols in. These are your vehicles. We've got Land Rover 90s that we had to strip down. They didn't have any mountings on them. And I can remember one particular range day when we were practicing, once we got some live ammunition, we had fucking sandbags on the bonnet with the Jimpy. And we did an advanced.
It's no different shit to Sterling raiding the New Zealand camp to get some. This is fucking decades later.
And we're sitting there and we're driving in and we advance to contact comes up and I'm like with the old in the passenger seat, giving it me. And then as soon as he puts the J turn in, I'm falling out of this Land Rover 90 with the frickin' Jimpy burning me on the side of my face. And I'm thinking, this is the SAS.
You don't see that in Strike Back, though, do you? It's all go down in there.
Do you think so? I mean, this is.
It's a hard case to hear that. Pretty. Also, again, just disappointing to hear that that's the sort of stuff that they were having to deal with and put up with and make shift with regards to their weapons and mounting systems, and then getting out and practicing. I think he made a point there of saying when they actually got live rounds, live ammunition, so that they could go and do some rehearsals and training. Right. Sounds like a bit of a cluster from the start, but the lads still pulled it together as well as they could, and got out there and got after it.
Stark contrast to what a lot of probably your experience of being with Tutu. We're talking a long time ago. Do you think that was a situation there? Was that because those, multiple ships? Do you think that's because it was one of the Hereford was still were finding their feet in how to apply themselves in the conventional war space.
Well, I think
is that the case?
history within the regiment, since it was formed in, say, Malaya, when it was reformed in Malaya, they've been very lucky. Every year they've fought in theatres where the first time they went there in Malaya, you had the Malayan Scouts, the regiment when the SAS was formed, they actually started to look at SOPs, how they fought the Chinese terrorists. So they were developing it, and they made a lot of mistakes. There's still a guy, he's in his 90s, I meet him occasionally, and the things that they were doing, like going, walking up in country for 3 weeks, and then having to walk back without, decent radios and stuff like that. So they developed it. Then Borneo happened, and the regiment went in and just ripped it up. So then the next thing is they're going out to the Yemen, Middle East. Then they had to learn desert tactics. They learn it. They taught, some of the operations went well, some didn't. The next time they go out to that theatre, they just rip it up. Go back to the 80s, the only thing that was going on was Northern Ireland and, say, the SP team. Everything was focused around black kit. That's where the threat was. And all of a sudden, there's a war in the desert. So we're going out there, and in certain cases, A&D Squadron did a superb job, a real good job, but the mistakes that were made, we say B Squadron, would never be made when the second Gulf War came on, and the guys were just going out there on Gulf War II and ripping it up and finding the feet. And the fact that them campaigns have gone on for so long now, I don't know, but I would imagine that they'll go in and just tear it up because it's on. They're on. So
yeah, the iterations of, no doubt, the improvements, not only in kit and equipment and technology and all that sort of stuff, but the learnings which Chris is talking about through the mistakes that have been made. The UK would have made some, and they've gone and taken those on board. Australia the same, New Zealand the same, US the same, and it's great to hear somebody like Chris speak about that. Maybe out of the game in terms of Chris, myself, I'm not sure. I'm assuming Ben Garwood is out of the regiment now as well, but they've no doubt seen some of the iterations and changes, and you see that when you're going through more so cycle, not so much selection, but on cycle, you are starting to implement some of the things that have been handed down and taught and passed on as a result of the guys that have deployed on operations and come back and gone, hey, we've been teaching this stuff here. This actually isn't that effective. This is what we've found is better for these scenarios, and this is why. And then they list out a whole bunch of rationale and stuff for it, which is really cool learning. So hearing Chris Ryan speak about, those examples there through combat, making some mistakes, maybe not doing as well, coming back, learning from that, and then having the courage to implement those things and then go out there and, to use his term, he said, where they go back out and rip it up. It's not surprising when you've got that level of soldier that's willing to do that, risk it all, go out with bare bones minimum equipment and maybe not necessarily the all the bells and whistles, and still take on the task and do those tasks exceptionally well, in my opinion anyway.
Absolutely, I'd say we learn from the mistakes. But the issue, I would say, has been, and I think this is probably something for the British anyway, we're reactive rather than proactive. So because we're reactive, we almost go back in and we're having to start from scratch. But you're lucky enough you've got adaptive people that can actually get amongst it and learn and evolve and sort of work in those environments. I think that is, as you said earlier, that is one of our biggest skill sets, being able to do that. But to be reactive rather than being proactive it's expensive, it's costly in other ways as well. That is one of the issues. I think that's across the board. But yeah, the lessons off the back of those two campaigns, the kit and equipment we've got now is pretty freaking awesome. The mobility skills and drills that the lads have got is awesome. The stuff that we need to continuously work on, and we always talk about this in any conversation, is the absolute basics. So all these big new kind of movement pieces and insertion techniques and everything, they're great. We learn and we adapt. But what we need to stay on top of is obviously your basic skills. And that is, as kids, getting the kids outside, taking my kid out fishing, shooting, walking, all those bits and pieces. So they learn the environment because you can adapt. You know, we talk about school, Brecon can be adapted anywhere. It's still the basics, isn't it? That's what needs to be constant.
Yeah.
I love the comment that Ben has shared there, and that's a large part, of my opinion, why the selection courses are the way they are. They're tried, tested, and proven. I've shared that in other reaction videos, probably to the selection videos that I've done some reactions to, and they work, and it's the basics on there, and it's the same. I love what he shared because it's sort of almost same sort of repetitive comments that I share with people that I'm lucky enough to work with, or that have reached out and wanting to get some guidance or mentorship in terms of their aspirations to look to join the unit. So a lot of that is, people looking too far ahead, worrying about things that are outside their control, and instead of doing that, me just trying to guide them back and steer them back to just, focus on the basics and doing the things that you need to do in order to get on selection in the first place, and then to be able to pass and meet those criteria on selection, during selection, and then worry about and focus on and stay present all throughout. And if you progress and get selected for further training, then, still stay present and focus on one course at a time. Don't start worrying about the resistance to interrogation. Don't start worrying about the patrol procedures or the jungle phase. Don't start worrying about the CQB and the validation shoots and all that sort of stuff in room combat. Stay present, listen to the instruction from the instructors and the directing staff, and it's not that you won't have any problems, but you'll go a lot better, and your mind will be less cluttered rather than fill it up with a whole bunch of other stuff. Anyway, I'm going to leave this one here. I've enjoyed this reaction again. This is part 3. Lots in here. As I mentioned, there's a few clips. I might do a separate video of that today to start reading through those. That may take a while. I'm not sure if I'll get through all of those clippings of the books, not clippings, but screenshots of the books in one hit. But I'll do my best to go through those as well as I can, and then just give my take on it. Anyway, if you made it this far, thank you very much for your time. As always, for sticking around, for your support. I sincerely appreciate it. And with that being said, the message is always the same. Anybody out there going through any difficulties, challenges, trials, or whether it's you or somebody that you know, this message is for you and or it's for them, to just keep turning up, keep staying in the fight, put one foot in front of the other, and take one day at a time. Know and trust that things can do and will get better if you want them to, but you do have to want it. You do have to do your part. So just stick at it. The sun will shine again. There are better days ahead, and those better days are always closer than you and I think. So stay in the fight. As always, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next video, there's a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all.